If you haven't been paying attention to the culture around collectible cards, you might not have realized how crazy the Pokémon TCG scene has gotten. The huge spike in interest for these cards has been attributed to a few factors: nostalgia, the pandemic, and something called a Logan Paul. And yeah, over 2020, interest in collectibles has grown across the board, but there's an even more specific phenomenon happening with Pokemon cards. Over 2020 and 2021, the amount of people collecting and selling Pokemon cards has grown exponentially and has attracted fanatics, hopeful investors, and scalpers buying tons of cards right in front of little children. The craze has gotten so out of control that retail stores like Target had to stop selling cards in their venues, card grading companies like PSA are drowning in a sea of 90s cardboard, and adults are buying tons of Happy Meals because they have Pokemon cards. Oh man, I wish I knew about that. Here I was buying McDonald's because I was hungry and broke and hate myself. But as influencers and investors continue to scoop up more and more cards from the children's game they don't know how to play, a looming bubble has grown bigger and bigger around the Pokemon TCG, with an inevitable burst seeming more and more likely with each passing day. So what happened? Why this collectible card game, and why now? And most importantly, why the fuck does this Charizard cost more than a new car?
Pokemon is now in full mania.
Craze that has become a global marketing phenomenon.
If you want to be a Pokemon master and your kids are going to want it, you have to have a Pokedex.
There was a period during the late 90s and early 2000s that has commonly been dubbed Pokemania. Understanding the original Pokemania, how it became popular, and what led to these cards becoming valuable is key to understanding what's happening with the TCG now. If you were too young or not born yet, or from a country where the late 90s Pokemon craze didn't hit, let me paint a picture for you. Pokemon was the shit. Video games, toys, television, movies, the cards, the fucking cards. If you were a kid during the late 90s, there is a 100% chance that you and everyone you knew collected Pokemon cards. Yes, even you who's saying to themselves, what is this guy talking about? I never collected Pokemon cards. Nope, you did. Shut the fuck up. It was so ubiquitous with the culture that now, as an adult, whenever the subject of Pokemon cards comes up, I don't need to ask the person I'm talking to if they collected Pokemon cards. If they came from a similar background, they did. Retailers, collectible shops, and game stores would be overrun by children, parents, and collectors mere moments after opening. Cards would be sold out across entire neighborhoods. People could purchase cards and flip them immediately for significantly more than what they bought them for just because people needed Pokemon cards. And when I say it was an epidemic, I'm not really being hyperbolic. Schools would end up banning students from bringing cards in out of fear of child gambling, concerned parents questioned whether this phenomenon was healthy for their children, and professional scam artists argued that Pokemon and Pokemon card collecting were leading children down the path of Satanism.
Pokemon world is a world of the demonic, of the satanic. But while you might not take it quite seriously, I assure you that demons take it quite seriously.
Yes, this is a real preacher named Phil Arms who was allegedly using the money he raised from his church to feed his crippling pill addiction. But as quickly as it came on, the fad soon subsided. The original Pokemania craze died off as we entered the 21st century, and while the TCG maintained an active and thriving competitive scene, the mainstream consumption of Pokemon cards fell significantly from its heights in the late 90s. People who had scooped up mountains of Pokemon cards in 1999 and 2000 in the hopes of cashing out had been burned, and the Pokemon card craze was thought to be a fad past its time. But that wouldn't last long, and the cards purchased during the late 90s and early 2000s would soon see a rise in value. Speaking of which, what even determines a card's value? By far, the most valuable set of English language Pokemon cards belong to the original base set, which was released by Wizards of the Coast in the late 90s. Because of the set's limited print run and the fact that 90% of the cards ended up in the hands of disgusting children like me, the base set had become the sort of gold standard when it comes to Pokemon card collectibles. When you see a Charizard selling for $300,000, it belongs to the original base set. But not every base set Charizard is equal, and that largely falls on the specific print run a given base set card was part of. Understanding the differences between the print runs and why they're valuable is important to make sense of the current Pokemania craze. I'll try not to be too granular here, because the differences between these print runs can get so specific that half the time I don't even know what the fuck is going on. But basically it goes like this. Wizards of the Coast ran 8 print runs for the original base set. The unlimited print run was the most widespread, and chances are if you own Pokemon cards from base set 1, they're probably unlimited. And I hate to break it to you, but the unlimited run is also the least valuable. The other 3 print runs were First Edition, Shadowless, and 1999 to 2000, all of which vary in price but are generally more valuable than the unlimited run. If you're interested in learning more about this, I'd highly recommend checking out this video from Lundkin's Collectables. I'll leave a link to it in the description. The basic takeaway is this: a Pokemon card's value is directly tied into its print run and how many of a certain variation was released. There's tons more unlimited base set cards than Shadowless, so the Shadowless base set print run is worth significantly more. Like a lot more, holy fuck. What makes these older cards even more valuable is the fact that they were published by Wizards of the Coast, who lost the publishing rights to the Pokémon TCG back in 2003, which was then handed over to the Pokémon Company International, a subsidiary of the Pokémon Company. Wizards ended up suing Nintendo and settled out of court, leaving those pre-2003 Pokémon cards in a legal gray area, making it extremely unlikely that any of the Wizards of the Coast era cards will ever be reprinted. But there is one more step that can drastically determine if your card is valuable or not. The difference between your Shadowless First Edition base set Charizard selling for a few $100 or a few thousand will come down to how a professional card grader evaluates it. While there are a number of companies that offer these kinds of services, I'm going to focus on one in particular: Professional Sports Authenticator, or PSA. Basically, you send your cards to PSA, pay a fee, and they'll have their experts evaluate your card, give it a score, and seal it in a quote-unquote unbreakable plastic shell. And this is where the real money is at. A PSA 10 base set Charizard can fetch 6 figures, while a PSA 2 might only get you a few thousand. And chances are the cards you had as a kid weren't kept in good enough condition to get a high PSA score. Tiny, seemingly insignificant imperfections on cards can drastically reduce their score, ranging from light scratches to even slightly off-center text. And if your card looks like this, you might as well just send PSA a piece of cardboard. It's gonna be worth about the same. So there you have it. Some cards become extremely valuable because of the very specific conditions they have to meet. Your Charizard should belong to the original base set, and preferably not from the more plentiful unlimited run. Assuming you got a hold of that card, which was rare even back then, it had to make it all the way from 1999 in not just relatively good condition, but really in good condition. Like, you sealed this card away and haven't even seen it in 14 years condition. When you look at all those factors, it makes a lot more sense that a card like this would end up selling for 6 figures. Over the next 15 years or so from the initial Pokemon card craze, there were valuable cards like base set Charizard that continued to fetch relatively high prices, gradually growing in value as more time passed since its initial printing. The competitive scene remained popular, and a whole subgenre of YouTube videos came into existence, focusing on the thrill of opening new packs and getting valuable cards graded from companies like PSA. Oh fuck yeah, open that booster pack, bitch. But it wasn't out of control. People collected, traded, and bought cards, but the Pokemon TCG community was relatively insular. Then the pandemic happened. As the entire world sheltered indoors for most of 2020, many people found themselves returning to the things they loved as children. Mirroring trends seen during the Great Depression, the rise in unemployment and other economic anxieties gave people both more free time and a yearning to retreat to the quiet comfort of hobbies that reminded them of a time with less existential dread. But as people began dusting off their old collectibles, a question popped into their heads. Is this worth anything? Collectibles across the board began to see a rise in value. I mean, anyone who's had to take out a small loan to buy a copy of Chibi Robo on the GameCube understands the struggle. But Pokemon card collecting, that morphed into its own beast. So, what fueled the second coming of Pokemon cards? Nostalgia, financial gurus, social media influencers, the mass unemployment, growing civil unrest, the general feeling that society itself is collapsing and that an economic system that favors multi-million-dollar corporations over people maybe wasn't the best option. Sorry, I'm having a mild panic attack. Basically, people were at home and scared about the future. And if you were around a certain age in the 90s, it could almost be guaranteed that you had a box of Pokemon cards lying around somewhere in your garage or attic. Card prices started gradually going up over the course of the year, with eBay revealing that Pokemon card sales had gone up by 60% from January to September 2020. Then, October 9th, 2020 happened. First, Logic won an auction for a base set Charizard that costed nearly $200,000. And then, Logan Paul hosted a charity livestream opening up a box of base set booster packs. And the Pokemon TCG scene got f***ed. As of the recording of this video, Paul's livestream has over 11 million views, and his follow-up Pokemon card videos have all received a similar amount of hits. There was a demonstrable effect that Paul had on the scene, and while Pokemon cards have been gradually rising in value over the course of the year, Paul's livestream almost single-handedly pushed it to another level. He quickly started a trend, and many YouTubers, streamers, and celebrities who had not been part of the TCG and collectibles scene before began collecting and posting card content. And at that point, Pokemania 2.0 had arrived. This new era of Pokemon card collecting craziness quickly began to mirror the original Pokemania. Collecting older, rare, and out-of-print cards had been going on for decades, but the mania around buying packs and cards that you can find at most retail stores hadn't been seen since the 90s. The combination of the upward trend over 2020, Paul's involvement, and the social media craze that came after led to a resurgence in the type of card collecting that, well, looked like this.
I am not doing that.
People barged into Targets and Walmarts, clearing out their selection of Pokemon cards within minutes of the store opening. The Pokemon Company International began increasing their print runs to meet demand, people got into fights, and Target had to eventually stop selling Pokemon cards in store. Oh my god, we're doomed. With the growing mainstream understanding of collectibles and the collectible market, the general public in 2021 has a much better understanding of how to ensure their items grow or at least retain their value. The days of letting grubby little children play with Pokemon cards and have fun like the disgusting freaks they are were long gone. Everyone was opening packs with the hopes of getting that chase card, and everyone knew condition and grading were the keys to getting the most value out of it. And in May of 2021, the Pokemon TCG collectible scene would get hit with another bombshell. PSA, overwhelmed with the enormous backlog of cards they had received since the beginning of the year, announced that they would temporarily stop accepting new cards. Throughout 2021, PSA was regularly receiving more cards over a single week than they would get in 3 months in previous years. PSA graded around 1 million Pokemon cards in 2020, and in the first 3 months of 2021, they had already quadrupled that amount. PSA simply did not have enough employees to get through this backlog. Remember, an actual person is doing the grading. There's no automated machines, no card grading drone, just some person in a warehouse being overwhelmed by what PSA has described as quote-unquote an avalanche of cardboard. But there is an ominous air looming over this market explosion. Like how the original Pokemania craze seemingly vanished overnight, there is a growing concern that the Pokemon card market will face a similar crash in the coming months or years. The website TCGplayer.com made a breakdown of the effect Pokemania 2.0 had on newer cards. Tracking the value of Dedenne GX, a card that was released in 2019, they noticed that while stuff like Logan Paul's unboxing did briefly raise the card's value, it quickly subsided. While cards printed before 2017, especially ones featuring the original 150 Pokemon, seemed to all see a slight spike in price that lasted for months after Paul's unboxing, anything printed in the last few years seems to be unaffected by it. New cards are continuing to sell out like crazy and shoot up in price on reseller markets. But because the Pokemon Company International will continue to increase print runs to meet demand, these cards are extremely unlikely to see the same kind of explosive growth in value that the Wizard of the Coast era cards have seen. That is something a lot of people who have jumped on the Pokemon train seem to misunderstand. They see what happened with the original Pokemon card craze, how absurdly expensive some of these new cards are now, and think that the cards they just purchased in Target will send their kid to college in 20 years. But that ignores the specific circumstances that led to cards like base set Charizard becoming so valuable. Or even worse is that some people know these cards will be worthless in a few years and are purposely trying to take advantage of people by buying up and scalping these cards on the aftermarket. And even the older cards might fall victim to a crash. Yeah, base set Charizard will likely remain valuable to the heat death of the universe, but all you have to do is look at the huge spike in price that these cards went through from 2019 to 2021, and it just doesn't seem sustainable. The card won't ever be worthless, but a significant downgrade as the inflation wears off seems inevitable. You know what I feel like gets lost during all this madness? This is a game played by thousands of people. Unlike the 90s craze where the majority of buyers were children and fans, the 2021 craze has been largely fueled by influencers, millionaires, and hopeful investors. Even as PSA suffers from a labor crisis, suffocating underneath a mountain of cardboard, those who actually like Pokemon and the Pokemon TCG seem to be the ones getting the short end of the pseudo-wudo. Wait, that kind of sounds weird. And look, I'm not saying that the influencers and investors are bad people or anything because of this. Well, except this person. Fuck this person. And even Logan Paul, I mean, his initial live stream did raise a lot of money for the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And hey, if you really want to dislike him, I'm sure he'll give us another reason to in like a week. Still, I find myself feeling bad for the children and adults who are genuinely interested in the Pokémon TCG because they, you know, like Pokemon. The funny thing is, super valuable cards like base set Charizard aren't even that good in the current meta of the Pokemon TCG. But the craze is so out of control now that the new cards that won't appreciate in value like the older ones, and cards that are much more competitive in the actual game are almost impossible to find at prices that aren't marked up. The irony is that as collecting Pokemon cards becomes more popular, it actually became much harder for people to play and enjoy the card game. You know, the whole f***ing reason for these cards to exist in the first place.